So we have been looking at this phenomenon of the blockchain technology being basically invading all kinds of applications, and it is kind of like a fashion where it's you're there, you're square, and it's one of these things where I think that is justifiably criticized for people just being attracted to it and invading it, and then really not understanding whether or not it's good for what the application is that it's being aimed at. So on the other hand, it's a phenomenal application. It's a phenomenal technology. But if you trace the purpose of the early applications of the technology, and what I'm talking about is not the really early applications of the technology that go all the way back to probably the 1990s, the early 1990s. But if we go back, say, 5 or 6 years ago, people were talking about using blockchains for alternative currency systems for things like micropayments. It was thought to be the driver, the technology driver for the payment system for the web. And it turns out that it's actually not that at all. It's much too expensive, much too costly, it takes too much energy, is not safe for a lot of people. Tens and I guess by now hundreds of millions of dollars have been lost in theft, so it doesn't quite have the properties that we would expect a well-designed currency system to have. On the other hand, it has shown that you can deploy a global system that has some very interesting properties, including some properties that are kind of astounding, where you could literally walk across the border with $1 million in your head, so to speak, undetected, just by memorizing a private key. And that's a phenomenon that probably is going to be exploited in this kind of currency system. But a lot of the other properties of blockchains are not being properly exploited. And we think that in the area of trust management, which is what Intertrust does for a living, so to speak, blockchains have a lot of interesting applications. One of them being a way in which you can record trust assertions, things that people that have a certain kind of authority, statements that they can make, can be recorded in a blockchain. And then you can have mechanisms where other people who rely on those assertions can verify that those assertions were in fact made. And you can, on that simple concept, you can base a trust management system that can help provide trust management for all kinds of applications on the web, including currency systems if you want, but more importantly, identity management systems, security systems for the Internet of Things, and just a variety of other applications. We haven't really exploited some of the different variations of how you can use blockchains, where what you can put in a blockchain ultimately is just the hashes of assertions that people make. You don't actually have to expose the plain text of those assertions until it's time where you want to verify its authenticity. So if I have an agreement with you I don't have to reveal that agreement to anybody, but I can put the hash of that agreement in a blockchain, and then at some future time you can say you want to demonstrate that you have that agreement with me to somebody else, and maybe there's some other rules that are verified. We can demonstrate that that agreement was made at a specific date, perhaps at a specific time, and there may be other parties, but none of that has to be revealed initially. You can make the wherewithal to actually authenticate it available only to the people who need to be able to see that. And by the way, that's a lot of the kind of thing that we do at Intertrust, which is to figure out how to make available information, including the authenticity of an agreement, to only the right people or the people who really need to know that information. So we can provide privacy, we can provide confidentiality, and we can use blockchain technologies quite fruitfully. I think GDPR is probably going to introduce the necessity of transparency for what we call trusted third parties. It won't. People will figure out that you can do analytics on data. We want to be able to do analytics on data, as there are so many things that can come out of the proper application of data analytics to large amounts of data. We just have to figure out ways, and have been figuring out ways of making sure that making the data available doesn't hurt people. And we can do that. And in some cases, we can use cryptographic technology. In other cases, we can use good data management hygiene and transparency of how data is processed.